Good evening. Welcome to the February 1st, 2011 meeting of the Board of Education to discuss the fiscal year 2012 operating budget. Before I begin, please turn off your wireless communications as they tend to interfere with the taping of the meeting. Our colleague, Ms. Patricia Eubanks, will not be in attendance tonight. I would like to take a moment of silence at the very beginning here for Mr. Antonio Sesker, a building custodian at Melwood Elementary School, and for Dr. Charles Herbert Flowers, Jr., who is a trainer of the famed Tuskegee Airmen and also named after our Charles Herbert Flower High School. Thank you for that moment of silence. Please remember family in your prayers. Ms. LeBon, call the roll, please.
On the motion, Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson? Mr. Armwood?
Present.
Ms. Waller?
Present.
Mr. Harris?
Present.
Ms. Beck?
Present.
Ms. Boston?
Present.
Ms. Eubanks? Mr. Barrows?
Present.
Ms. Higgins?
Present.
Ms. Jacobs?
Here. Thank you. The Board of Education has convened this evening for the sole purpose of discussing the fiscal year 2012 proposed operating budget. This year's budget proposes increased challenges due to the following. On January 21st, 2011, the Governor of Maryland released his proposed budget, which reduced the district's revenue by $20.8 million from the current year's appropriation. In addition, the district will lose over $100 million in federal stimulus money, which expires June 30 of 2011. It is important to note that the economic downturn striking every possible organization, corporation, and business, no one was exempt from the tightening effects of the recession, and unfortunately, our school district, PGCPS, has not escaped its grasp either. We ask that our community work together to advocate for additional dollars, and in the event that we are not successful in garnering additional support, that we work together to protect classrooms and to protect children. The Board of Education is scheduled to adopt its budget on February 24th, 2011. We are statutorily obligated to send this budget to the county executive by March the 1st. The recommended budget would then be forwarded to the county executive, Mr. Rashawn Baker. He will then develop his proposed budget based on what we have presented to him and must present it to the county council by March the 15th, 2011. The county council must then adopt a budget which includes the school system's budget and it's, which includes the school system's budget funding within designated categories, and that must be done by June the 1st. The Board of Education will then have an opportunity to reconcile the budget based on whatever changes or plans that have been submitted by the county council, and that must happen and is currently scheduled for June 23rd and statutorily required by June the 30th. Tonight, our superintendent, Dr. William Haight, will provide a brief overview of the fiscal 2012 proposed operating budget. We ask that you stay for the entirety if you possibly can, and please, based on the questions that board members ask, we are anticipating that Dr. Haight will also have follow-up questions and follow-up answers accordingly and post those on the website. Dr. Haight, I yield to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening to all of the members of the Board of Education and to of you in public. In December, we proposed a operating budget, and that budget represented a request of $1.68 billion. And to make up for losses of previous funding associated with stimulus and ed jobs from the federal government, the request included an additional $65 million from the state and $25 million from the county. The proposed budget was designed to provide our students with what they need in order to succeed as 21st century citizens and high school graduates. And the budget also allows us to continue programs and services that have enabled us to continue academic progress over the past 5 years. In the governor's recent announcement, there was an additional $20.8 million reduction in our budget. That has forced us to seek new ways to streamline operations. So therefore, at this point, we are facing an $85 million budget gap. Combined with Baltimore City, our reductions represent $35 million of the total statewide reduction of $94 million in educational funding. We are operating efficiently as central office and central administration accounts for only 3.5% of our total budget, but as you will see in our presentation, a significant amount in terms of what we're proposing to eliminate. We're identifying cuts to bridge the gap. We will do whatever we can to save staff and programs that have had the greatest impact on classrooms and on learning. I think what's also important to understand or to consider as we walk through this presentation is that the reason we do this work is really to enhance the profiles of all of the young people who graduate from our school system. We want them to be equipped with the skills and competencies to be independent learners, critical thinkers, problem solvers, and to achieve their best academically. We also want them to internalize effective personal and organizational behaviors and take individual responsibility to develop skills and good work habits. We think those are the skills associated with the profile of every student who should graduate from our system. In order to do that, we have a theory of action around teaching and learning. First and foremost in that theory of action is that schools are the primary unit of change and the primary unit of influence. So therefore, our ability to protect schools and to protect classrooms becomes critically important. We also believe inside of this theory of action that the most important interaction is between that of a teacher and of the learner. And so all of the work that we do to enhance a teacher's ability to engage with the learner becomes extremely important. And we also believe that teaching improves through an opportunity to reflect on their practice with their colleagues. So having time and space for teachers to take part in such an activity is extremely important. And we also think about this from the perspective of aligning our curriculum, our assessments, and our practice. In other words, making sure that there's the appropriate level of rigor and high expectations for all of our students as they matriculate through our system. To do all of that and to encourage that level of teaching and learning, we also believe that the principals are a primary force in setting the expectations, both for students and the culture of the school. So we compare all of the recommendations we are making against this theory of action and that profile of a graduate that I shared earlier. So now I'm going to ask Mr. Stansky to walk us through the remaining part of this presentation that talks specifically about what was proposed in December and now what we're proposing tonight in order to meet the $85 million revenue shortfall. Mr. Stansky.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is a slide you saw last week, but this once again kind of puts in context and framework as a district where we've gone as far as our increase in FTEs as compared with our enrollment. So as you can see again on the chart from 2006, our FTE count has actually grown by a little over 1.6%, while in that same time frame, the enrollment has dropped nearly 6%, over 6% from 2006. And it's important to note too is what stands out in this chart, as you can see, is as I've given other presentations to the board, that FY8 was our really our banner year as far as money. And as you can see, we had almost 20,000 FTEs, full-time equivalents in fiscal year 8, even though our enrollment from the previous year had dropped almost 1,500 students. But when the economy turned bad, when the housing market plummeted, was FY9, as you can see, we starting to make some significant reductions in those positions. Fortunately, when we made those reductions over the last couple of years, most of these positions have been vacant. As you can see, as our enrollment continues to decline, we have really a structural problem. The district is right now structured for Thornton, which was, when Thornton was getting fully implemented, we were seeing $100 million increases in revenue every year. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing decreases in revenue, continuing costs to go up and up, and so it's now time. We're left with little choice to come in and right-size the district. So this is just sort of to remind the public and the board that we've already made nearly $70 million in cuts in the proposal that we had given to the board in December. We're looking at, for the third straight year, no COLA for our employees. This is just a 1% COLA. If it was a 1% COLA, it's $10 million. No step increase again for the third straight year, nearly $16 million in savings. Continued freeze for their second year on all stipends and differentials, which is $9.5 million. Of course, with the expiration of stimulus funding, nearly $40 million, we had roughly 250 positions funded through Title I, Special Education, Head Start, stimulus funds that expired, are going to expire June 30th, 2011. And it's important to also note that we had stabilization money as well, which was essentially paying all our utility bills for 2 years that has now come off the books. So the money had prevented cuts for 2 years. The economy just has not turned around, and does not look like we're going to be receiving any additional funds from the federal government. We also had recommended reductions of $3.7 million and 8 FTEs, so most of that is in the contracted services area for central office. We had changed the custodial staffing formula, which reduced 75 FTEs and $2.2 million. We had changed the central office staffing formula for secretaries, the elimination of data coaches at our middle schools. We had changed the formula for guidance counselors so that schools with 350 or less enrollment would share a guidance counselor at the elementary school. The elimination of the general ed portion of the means program. Some funding, mostly coaching, for our alternative governance schools, and also a reduction of 15 FTEs in instructional coach category. So with all that said, we had $70 million in cuts, but we felt that the district was obligated to ask the state and the county for additional funding to meet our initial budget gap. So we had asked for an additional $89 million, 64 of which was, we asked the state, and 25 million from the county. And as Dr. Haidt alluded to when the governor came out with his proposal, not only did we not get the 64 million, but we were also cut an additional 20.8, leaving our current gap of $85 million. So what I'm about to walk through is our proposal as to how we are going to meet that budget gap. So what you'll see is the reductions divided up into 3 sections. First section is system-wide reductions. Second section will be central office administrative sort of support reductions, and then the final section will be school reductions. So to start off, we were proposing a 3-day furlough for all executive staff. Save, that would be your chiefs, your directors, all your non-union affiliated employees, which would save roughly $131,000. We had also built in 194 new FTEs for converting temporary employees into full-time, and mostly in the area of special education and food services. We are going to reverse that addition. That would be $10.8 million in savings. I will note that this would have to be negotiated with Local 2250. We're also proposing a 1-year freeze on all degree advancement. Once again, would have to be negotiated with the collective bargaining units, and would projected to save us about $1.2 million. And then finally, from system-wide reductions, we're looking to negotiate with our current provider for health insurance to see if we can get some additional savings on our health insurance management, which is, we're roughly looking at $3.5 million. So on the central office side, these are reductions that each chief has brought to the administration for recommendations to help us meet our budget gap. In the area of the chief of division of academics, we're looking at $4.9 million, which includes a reduction of 11 FTE and other contracted services. We're looking at a reorganization of the area offices, which will save us $5.4 million and reduce 63 FTE. We're looking at area business management services, savings of $1.9 million and 17 FTEs, and this includes a merger of 2 departments, or 2 reorganizations essentially. It merges fiscal compliance in with the budget and management services department, and also merges the benefits office from human resources into the Department of Payroll Services. We're also proposing a reorganization of communications department, which would save $560,000 and 7 positions. And then finally, on this slide, we're proposing a reduction of $3.3 million to Evening High School, which would essentially close the 3 sites, but be replaced with an online alternative that our Evening High School students can register for. Area of Human Resources, a $1.2 million reduction and 7 FTEs. Once again, this would include moving the benefits office over to payroll, and then the reorganization of teacher leadership and school leadership into a new office in Human Resources, the Office of Talent Development. In the area of information technology, we have a savings of $5.4 million, which includes contracted services and roughly 19 FTEs. Performance Management Office, we considered $364,000 in reductions, which includes 2 positions and some contracted services money. Student Services, reduction of $673,000 and 12 FTE, and then a reduction in the General Counsel Office and legal fees of $271,000. And then finally on this slide, in supporting services, we're projecting right now an $8 million savings, roughly 100 FTE. This would include changing of the bell schedule and the elimination of specialty program transportation. So on to school-based reductions. As Dr. Hyde alluded to earlier, we really tried our best to keep cuts away from the schools as much as possible. We have nearly $32 million in reductions in the central office, with only, and that's only considering that's 3.5% of our budget. However, given the fact that we're looking for $85 million, there's just not enough money in central office to cut to meet that target. So we had no choice but to then look to the schoolhouse. So our first item is targeted class size reduction. So what we've done in the past is done straight across the board class size increases. We're looking to target certain areas, electives, and class sizes that are small in enrollment, and to increase those class sizes, look at specific grades as well. Projecting right now a savings of $20 million, 259 FTE. I will tell the board we don't have specifics as to which class sizes we're going to increase yet, but by next work session we will come to you with a detailed proposal as to what the actual class size increase looks like. Next on the list is a reduction of athletic directors to 0.5. It saves roughly 11 FTE and $826,000. We're also proposing an increase into the staffing formula for the creative and performing arts schools. So just to give you kind of a background on that, so creative and performing arts schools still get the K-8 staffing formula, and then they get additional staffing because they're a creative and performing arts school. And that staff is right now based on 1 FTE for every 100 students. We're proposing to increase that to 1 FTE for every 120 students. So this would be Thomas Poland, Benjamin Falloy, and Hyattsville Middle School. So it saves 6 FTE and $413,000. We're also proposing to reclassify all assistant principals at elementary schools. They're currently working 11 months. We're proposing to reclassify them to 10 months. We're also right now targeting a reduction in media specialists. We're looking at roughly 90 FTEs, which is about half the media specialists, $7.4 million. And again, we'll come to you with a detailed formula as to how we would allocate the 90. We're obviously looking at some of our smaller elementary schools would have to share media specialists, and possibly look to fill in with some media aides in some of the other schools as well. Also, a proposal to, so we had an addition in the December proposal to add paraprofessionals to our kindergartens and our language immersion schools. We are removing that proposal. It doesn't have the FTE on there, but that's 9 FTE and $492,000. We're also going to remove the coordinator position at Cesar Chavez Elementary School. Continue on. Right now, staffing formula allocates an in-school suspension teacher at every middle and high school in the district. It's roughly 50 FTEs. we are proposing that we swap that those teaching positions and put paraprofessionals in those positions. It saves the district roughly $1.7 million. Next on the list is pre-K. So we're right now the only district in the state that offers full-day pre-K. And I don't know if the board is aware or not that enrollment for pre-K is backed out of state funding. So therefore, they do not count our pre-K students as students when they're giving us funds. So this is a program that is completely district funded. You have no state support. Obviously, there's Head Start, the federal program Head Start, that funds some classes, but the majority of your pre-K costs, which right now is over $33 million, is all district funded. So the roughly 7,000 pre-K students that we have, the state backs those students out when giving us funding. And we have the highest enrollment also in the state for pre-K. So we are proposing tonight to move to half-day pre-K. Obviously, what that does is cut your staffing in half. It does increase transportation costs somewhat, but we are projecting a savings of nearly $10 million by moving to half-day pre-K. Next on the list is currently I believe we have an Jrotc program at every high school. We are proposing to move the Jrotc program to regional-based sites. It would save us roughly 41 FTE and $3 million. Now the Armed Forces does pay for some of the salaries of those individuals, but I believe it's down to 30%, so the district covers 70%. The Armed Forces cover 30%. So you would be losing a small amount of grant money with that, but the savings you see up there, though, is all general fund savings that we're proposing to see from the moving those to regional-based programs. We also, there was a recommendation to move John Hanson French Immersion into Shugart. We are proposing right now to delay that move for a year. That would save 11 FTE and roughly $616,000. We're also proposing that a $50 fee for high school athletics. I believe we are the only district in the state that does not charge some sort of fee for athletics. So we're proposing $50 fee right now, projecting additional revenue of $476,000. Next on the list is a reading recovery program. This was 3/4 funded through general fund, and the other part was funded through stimulus, special education stimulus. It's a very expensive program. It's a lot of one-on-one work, and we believe we can meet the needs of the children who are struggling reading in the early grades through more cost-effective measure. So we are proposing to eliminate the program. It's roughly 50 FTEs and $3 million. And then the final school-based is proposing closing of the Schmidt Center. That's 8 FTE and roughly $687,000. Did want to talk to the board for a minute about a couple items that were proposed in the December budget that were cuts that we are recommending that we add back into this in the proposal we're presenting tonight. First is we had proposed to bump everyone's healthcare contribution rate up 5%. So the way it works is for employees who are at the district from years 1 through 8, they currently pay 25% of the cost, whereas the employer pays 75%. And then folks who have been here 8 years and longer pay 20%, and the district pays 80%. We had proposed that everyone move up 5% for a savings of $10.8 million. We are deciding to not pursue that cut at this time. When we looked at our neighboring jurisdictions, meaning neighboring school districts, we found that we were by far, our employees paid the highest percentage to their health insurance. And from a competitiveness standpoint, to attract new employees or to retain our current employees, we just felt that while the cut would give us some significant savings, it would hurt us given the fact that we're already not giving COLAs, not giving steps, freezing stipends and differentials. This would just be another item that would, be put on the backs of our employees. And then given the fact that they're already paying the higher share as compared to other districts, we just felt that that we could probably we should reverse this cut. And then the last item is we want to put in some funding for the hard work the National Board Certified Teachers put in. Before, when we had the stipends funded, there was a $5,000 stipend plus $2,000 match from the state. So we're proposing to add $500,000, which would give $2,000 to the employees, and then would make them eligible for the $2,000 state match. So those are the two add backs. So final slide, this is just to conclude what I went through. The systemic reductions, it's about roughly 16% of all of the reductions we're making. The central office reductions, again, 32%, and then school-based is 51%. So we did make a total of nearly $97 million worth of cuts. We're proposing to add back an additional $11.3 million through the health insurance and the National Board stipend for a total reduction of $85.7 million. Madam Chair, this concludes the presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stansky. Colleagues, we're going to adhere to the 5-minute, 3-minute rule. Ms. LaBonne, please be cognizant of that. And we're going to do 2 rounds. If there's a need for a 3rd round, I'll ask for a motion to do so. First on my list is Mr. Harris.
Thank you. So I have about 7 questions, but I'll do my 5 minutes. My first question is about the National Board certification stipend. What was the what's your justification for having that stipend but freezing all other stipends? What was the reasoning behind that?
One of the reasons, Mr. Harris, was looking at, when we go back to the first slide that talks about the theory of action around teaching and learning, and one of the things that we've been attempting to do over the past year or so is really have a definition for effective instruction. And we have a mechanism in place that allows individuals to pursue the National Board certification, and that mechanism was based upon historically their ability to obtain the National Board certification. And then that was awarded with a stipend that we removed. And we're not recommending the full stipend, but we're recommending a stipend that allows them to get the monies that the state has put aside for them to achieve that that designation of National Board certification. But it's really to make sure that we're continuing to attract and retain some of our most effective individuals by National Board certification standards.
And now the $50 fee for athletics, that's for middle school and high school, or
just high school? That's just high school.
And are you still proposing to cut middle school athletics, or is that added back in?
No, that wasn't added back in. That's still on the proposal for being eliminated.
Could you just take a look to see if you were to add the $50 fee to middle school athletics, would that fund the program, or how much it would cost? Sure. How much of a fee you could students could pay, or families could pay for us to fund middle school athletics, because it is very beneficial for students.
We will.
And evening high school, it says you have up there that it's going to be online now. What is that going to look like? I mean.
Yeah, so Mr. Harris, we'll have to come back with the recommendation for how we would be able to deliver that support for students who are enrolled in evening high school, but it will look very different than what it looks like now. And we were trying to use technology at fewer sites as opposed to having larger sites, and having fewer sites and having fewer people that are able to support students through the use of technology. But Ms. Golston is not here this evening, and we want to come back and give you a full explanation of how that will look, and we're planning to do that at the next budget work session.
And how many FTEs are we in the new budget altogether? How many FTEs are being cut?
So I would say between our first proposal in December and then this proposal, we're cutting over 1,200 FTEs. So the total will be just over 17,000, 17,007.
Okay. I know that furloughs is not going to help keep all of those FTEs, but just talk about why'd you decide to have no furlough, well, only 3 furlough days for executive positions, but why'd you decide to have cutting instead of having those furlough days?
Two things, Mr. Harris. And one is that if you go back to the chart that has the increase in positions versus the decline in enrollment, at some point we have to look at the number of positions that are more commensurate with our enrollment. So at some point we have to do that. The other thing is that furloughs are a temporary solution, which end up costing you that same amount of money the following year just to restore those positions. So it becomes very temporary in terms of that. And then the third, I said 2, and it's 3. And the third is that we want to remain competitive, and we want to remain competitive to both attract and retain effective teachers into our system. And we're doing this in the face of no cost of living increases, no step increases for the past 3 years, where some of the districts that surround us, they've been able to offer step increases, cost of living, no furloughs. So while we haven't been able to offer the cost of living or step increases, we felt that it was important to recognize the tremendous work that our employees do each and every day, and by not including furloughs as a part of this recommended budget.
I'll wait for Ron to.
Ms. Johnson.
Mr. Harris, thank you. Your questions, well, I didn't scratch them off. They were the same as I had. Dr. Hyde, I want to return to the furloughs. Clearly, it is something that no employer wants to look at. But when you look at the potential for 1,200 FTEs across the system being lost to the system, if they have had value to the system, their loss clearly is going to create some jitteriness in the system until it stabilizes. If that is true, those who will remain whole, having their colleagues to leave, adds stress to their workload, to their lives, as they begin to try to counterbalance the loss. So it is interesting how we will be able to maintain them in the system if we have so stressed them because their colleagues have had to leave. Now, having worked through furloughing and riffing within PGCPS, I acutely know what this feels like. And while I don't want anybody furloughed, I don't want anybody lost. We've got an $85 million budget gap, but we also have sustainability that has to be in the system. Because if we cut too far, what's going to happen is, how long is it going to take us to get back to the day of where we are now? That's my big problem. I do absolutely believe that you need to have a plan to look at what will happen if we do furloughing of the system, with maintaining some positions that you have placed here for deletion. My next point, I cannot believe that going to an online instructional program for evening high school with this category of students, with the huge level of burden that they bring to striving to get that diploma, can in any way be replaced by a computer. I'm a tech person. I love it, But the reality is these children, these students, many of whom who don't have it at home, there is too much of a risk of these students becoming lost to not only the system, but to our society because they don't have the requisite skills. So I am extremely concerned about that. There is so much more in looking at this. My last point is, we did 250 hires under the stimulus. Stimulus was wonderful, but we also knew that it was only going to be for 2 years. Were these new hires? Were they new programs? Knowing full well that the money was going to disappear, and the way that the country was already teetering, we did not really have a plan for how we were going to have the sustainability within those that we hired, and so now we're looking to jettison them. I am just incredulous that here we are, people who just got here, who provided value to the system, and we're looking to out them now. I'm not saying we have to keep them. I'm not saying we don't have to cut them. But I'm wondering, was there a better use of stimulus money that could have built in the sustainability that we needed, like putting it in technology that was not going to wear out in 2 years? I just don't know. I have so much more, but I will wait until the next round. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, I will respond to the last point because I think it's important. Actually, I'll respond to two. The evening high school, so it's not replaced solely with a computer. And one of the things that we think that we can deliver that resource with fewer staff than we have now. And we don't think that evening high schools have to be replications of comprehensive high schools. And we have many staff now that are similar to the staff that we put in schools during the day. And I'm not sure that that's needed. And many of the students who are taking advantage of evening high school are also enrolled in school during the day. So they're enrolled during the day, and then others are taking some credit recovery classes in the evening. And we think there's a better way to deliver that service. I also want to respond to the stimulus because I think it's important. And I think when stimulus was advertised, it was advertised as a way to save jobs and create jobs where you could, where organizations could. We were not in a position to create jobs. So the stimulus for us prolonged what would have likely have happened 2 years ago had we not had those funds. So it did prolong jobs for a period of time, but we didn't hire new individuals. That was a job-saving mechanism for us.
Thank you, Dr. Height. Dr. Height and Mr. Stansky, what would be helpful, I think, not only for the board, but for our public, is all of us as board members have, areas that are really sensitive to us. I mean, I could name 3 right now that really trouble me. When you respond to the questions, I would also like to hear what's the alternative. So compared to what? What happens if this cut doesn't happen? And I don't know if you've thought it out that far. I hope so, obviously, at this point. But I think it would be helpful to us if we know, okay, fine, if we don't cut that, then it's this. Because all the decisions are tough. That's all I'm asking. If you could help us along those lines, I think that would help us a lot. Next is Ms. Boston.
I have a question about the ROTC. How many students are presently enrolled in our junior ROTC programs in our high schools?
Ms. Boston, we're getting that information for you.
Okay, that was one question. You mentioned something in the proposed budget that you sent to us about an incentive to get retirees to retire, which could be a good savings for us. Do you know how many employees we have right now that are eligible for retirement? And if so, how much of a savings would that be if we could come up with some type of incentive?
Right, so I'll just walk you through a basic scenario of what we're kind of thinking about. We're still trying to construct it. So right now we have a little over 1,000 employees who are eligible to retire, ranging from all types, from teachers to paraprofessionals, executives, all. And so how really a retirement incentive plan works there, you save money, is you really have to get positions that you're cutting. So if we're to lay somebody, if you go through and you lay somebody off who's making $50,000 a year, but instead of laying that person off, you incentivize somebody to retire who's making $100,000 a year. So there's $50,000, but then the savings backs out because you have your incentive, which could be, I don't know, $15,000 or $20,000, and then plus their leave payout. So we're looking roughly, in a scenario like that, you would save probably $10,000 per employee. So if you get 100 to 200 people to retire, you're talking about $1 million worth of savings. So that's how you can structure it. There's other ways too, where the IRS allows you to spread the payment out over 5 years. So the incentive can be spread out over 5 years. It can be put into a tax-deferred retirement account, which will, then the individual who's retiring can draw on it when they if they're already reached retirement age, can draw on it tax-free. So there's a lot of things, but over the next probably week to 2 weeks, we'll actually have a concrete proposal for the board. It'd be through a resolution that you would actually vote on.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, this is in the category of so then what? And so our ability to do these types of things are greatly impacted as we return things to the budget proposal, because all of these figures represent an amount that may allow us to do an incentive for individuals who are eligible to retire. It may allow us to look at other options for programs, but in the event that we back out some of these proposals, then it takes those opportunities away. So that's the so then what category.
Ms. Boston, looking at our entire high school population, 6,100 students have had at least one course in ROTC, about 1/5 of our population.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boston. Oh, you do. When you said thank you, I didn't know you were done.
Okay. I'm real concerned about the increase in our classroom sizes. That really bothers me a lot, because to increase our classroom sizes and to eliminate, we're actually talking about eliminating classroom teachers. And it's a large number once again, just like it was last year when we had to do that. How is this, have you worked up how this is going to affect? I mean, what is the number? We've already, I think, increased some of the classroom sizes by, 2 students almost per class? So are we talking about a number, two more or 3? Or how is that formula? What is?
Yeah, and Ms. Boston, we're going to come back with a pretty specific plan for what grades and what courses. Because as indicated on the proposal, this talked about a targeted class size increase. So perhaps in core classes, they may not have an increase, but other classes may. Or in specific classes where, as students have historically been performing under a state proficiency average, we may not have the same level of increase or any increase at all in those places. What we want to do is come back and give you specific numbers to where, in terms of grades and in terms of courses, that number one, we have room to increase any numbers of students, and also those grades and or courses where we should not be increasing class size.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boston. Mr. Burrows.
Can you please go to slide 14? I do first want to start off by saying this is a very difficult process, and any input that we can receive from the community and our friends in labor. I would really appreciate that, and I know my colleagues would really appreciate your constant daily feedback so that as we make these tough decisions, they're most informed. How did you determine the health insurance rates back to 75%? How did you determine that?
Again, initially we were looking for some cost-saving measures. I've addressed the board before. One of the cost drivers that we're continuing to see is health insurance. But when we stepped back and looked at the 85 million, and then we looked at what other county school system employees are paying. Neighbors to the north, Montgomery County, their employees only pay 5%. Anne Arundel, I think it's 10, 15%. And so what we saw was our employees, as compared to districts in the area, are already paying a higher percentage than the other jurisdictions. And so again, from a competitiveness standpoint, from retaining, attracting employees, we felt like we just could not raise it anymore, or we'd be really at a competitive disadvantage when, recruiting or, retaining good, high-quality employees.
So out of the list of cuts, one of the programs that I'm most concerned about is the evening high school program that costs $3.3 million. I attended Crosland High School, and I actually volunteered for a year in an algebra evening high school class when I was in the 9th grade. This group of students, they actually need more support, not less. It's a very, very sensitive group of students that, for some reason, they're in night school, whether they had a baby or they work all day for their family and they can only go to school at night, or whether the classroom in evening high school is more compatible to their learning style. Evening high school is truly valuable, and I can't imagine cutting that program. I would like to see the data on how many students we have in the evening high schools. I would venture to say that a lot of our evening high school students, definitely up in the northwestern area, there's probably a high Hispanic population, high African American male population throughout the entire programs. And like I said, these students need more support, not less. It's a very fragile group. And when this process first started, if we want to add something, we have to propose, how do we want to pay for it? And I, concur with Ms. Johnson. This might, be a first. But I concur with Ms. Johnson on this, that we do need to look at furloughs because the stakes are too high, our students are too important, our staff are too important for us to not consider that. And it's only, for this program, it's only $3.3 million. One furlough day gives us $5 million. I do want to hear from my friends in labor your thoughts on this. And I would also be very hesitant to furlough someone who's already making minimum wage. But I would like to see the demographics, how many students that we're actually impacting with the evening high school program.
We can give you some of that information right now.
Ms. Burrows, the numbers, and this is as of January 25th, Crossland Evening High School has 184 students, Largo has 140, and Northwestern has 141 for a total enrollment of evening only for 465.
How many students graduate each year out of the program?
We can pull that data. It'll take me just a second, though. I have it. Okay.
While you're looking for that, Dr. Comer-Potter, so I'm probably going to get tomatoes thrown from that end and that end on this furlough issue. And so while I'm not completely there, we have not given our employees one dime, zero money in the last 2 years. None. they have not seen anything. And on top of not seeing increases, they've been furloughed. County employees, at least some of them, were given an increase and then furloughed, which means they didn't necessarily realize it, but it went to their base pay. So that, as hard as that is right now as part of the discussion, and I'm totally open to whatever further conversations we need to have about it, but I do think that that is critical when we are talking about the furlough issue right now. They have not received any increases. And so now we're talking about continuing no increases in this proposal and additional furloughs. So that just causes me some heartburn. I'm sorry, did you have, and I didn't mean to take up his time.
No problem.
Graduation for Largo last year, and I have all 3 years, but I'll just give you last year. They graduated 69 out of Largo last year. Northwestern graduated 73, and Crossland graduated 80 students.
Okay. But to that issue, Ms. Jacobs, it's just an option.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to.
And also,
Put that out
this health insurance rate, it was taken out of the budget. That's $10 million that maybe if, we don't furlough, we can put that back as a cut. And that would also fund the $3.3 million needed to preserve the evening high school program.
Mr. Burrows, that's an add back. We're not, you said remove are you suggesting remove the 75-25?
So you're adding this back into the budget?
Yes, we're adding this back.
Oh, what I'm saying is we can take it back out and save the 10.8 million and get the money needed to fund these programs.
I see.
I just said that's an option. I mean, these are all options. Members of the community, members in labor, if you know any other better options, please send me an email. I'll talk to you after the meeting. But these are just some options.
Mr. Burrows, that would have to be negotiated with our labor partners if we were to do that.
Okay.
Here's the other thing, and I think it's important to consider, and to your earlier point, Madam Chair, and what we're trying to do is put together like the unit costs for all of these things that we're talking about. And Ms. Boston, you asked a question about ROTC, but to come back and give you the unit cost of that if we are absorbing the 70% of each position that's associated with ROTC. But I just want to give this for some perspective. There are 465 students in evening high school. We pay, that budget amount is $3 million. We back out, so 185 of those students are only enrolled in evening high school, 185 students. That means that we do get funding from the state for those students. They are actually counted as our regular students. For all of the other students, it's costing us approximately $6,451 above the amount per pupil that we spend. So it's $19,000 essentially per student in evening high school. And so I just want to put that in perspective as we go through this process to talk about a unit cost for those students. And I have to give you more exact figures than that because I backed out a number, but it's approximately $19,000 per student who's enrolled in evening high school because in many cases we're paying for them for the day and the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Okay, Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly, we do have a task ahead of us with the budget. I'm going to follow through. My first question is about the evening school. And my question is, are you looking to other outside entities or business partners to assist with the operation of evening school?
Ms. Waller, we're looking at other possibilities. We're looking at a lot of possibilities for how we can deliver that at a lower cost to our system. I mean, even if we have to pass that cost along so that it's not overburdening the families who are participating, how we could do that in the most cost-efficient way and effective way for our families as possible. And
I know that we are asking for our community, and I've heard the term tonight, I like friends in labor, to provide us input. but by what means are you encouraging or not encouraging employees to provide input into the budget process? Would you address that, please?
I'll be glad to. We have actually a site inside of the HR Customer Service Department. We have a mechanism actually that collects recommendations from staff members, and we've been receiving some very good recommendations
Excellent.
from staff members. We're also providing them with updates. I sent all employees an email today just to let them know what we would be proposing tonight and that they may be impacted, and here's how you can help us. And we're encouraging them to continue with their recommendations, both to either the mechanism inside of HR. We have a web page inside of our web page where individuals can provide questions. We will provide the responses and then add all of those responses to other questions that we've answered as well. So we're encouraging at every level, if you will, input from our staff members, just as we're encouraging input from our community and from our parents.
And because we know these are our foot soldiers and they're out there every day with our, the community and our students. And at some point, would that information be shared with the board, or is it going to be consolidated in some of the questions that we've given you all and the recommendations that we've given you?
Yes, when we bring those out back to the board at the next work session, Ms. Waller, we're going to make those public for everyone so they can see both your questions and the responses. Also, our labor partners have also had questions. We want to put those there.
Okay.
We have been meeting with them regularly, and they also have had some great suggestions as well. But it is a approach where we're all trying to problem solve this pretty dramatic revenue shortfall that we have.
And certainly, I would encourage our friends in labor to work with us and to provide input to us at this time. We want to hear from you now and not, February the 28th. So please be sure and talk to your, members and, let's work with this together. Now, let's see, I don't know what page it is, but we were talking about the custodial staffing. We have high expectations for the public safety in our schools and also for the statics of our facilities. If we cut 75 custodial staff persons, and for instance, like when we have the snow and the ice, and we've got some complaints that properties were not cleaned, is this going to increase overtime?
No, what it does is our staffing formula. I'll get you the specific staffing formula. It's based on a square footage, and it was actually staffed fairly richly as compared to what we saw as national standards and standards in other school districts. So we are actually moving. What we're doing is essentially increasing the square footage amount that a custodian will have to cover, but that we feel like it is in line with what the national standard is, and also what other neighboring jurisdictions with similar square footage are, how they are staffing their buildings. But I will get you the specific staffing formula. I just off the top of my head cannot remember what it is.
And also, how is this going to affect overtime? If we're cutting people and then we're going to have to pay overtime, how would that affect us? And I'm through, Madam.
Again, the work will get done with the existing staff. We don't anticipate, it's 75 positions. So right now, I'm looking at numbers. So Montgomery County Public Schools staffs has what, 23 million square feet of building space, whereas we have 18.5 million. And our positions are roughly, it looks like similar in the number of staff that we have compared to them. So again, I'll get you the specifics of where we're increasing the formula in the next meeting. Okay, I see it. Okay, there's the averages. So we average one for every 16,000 square feet, and Montgomery is one for every 17,000 square feet. So the proposal is to increase it by that 1,000 square feet, and that would reduce the FTE number by 75, which we do believe we'll get through attrition. that's a position that we see fairly high turnover in every year.
Yeah, we lose about 80 to 100 FTEs in that area every year, so it's pretty in line with the reductions.
Thank you, Ms. Waller. Ms. Higgins.
Thank you. Dr. Hyde, first I'd like to thank you and all of your staff. This obviously has been a very difficult process for you, and one that we were all hoping to be able to avoid. The $70 million cut was going to be hard enough, and this additional $85 million makes it a very challenging situation. So thanks for all of you who put your time into that. I am interested in, and I understand next budget session we'll talk more about evening high school and that this is not the loss of opportunities for these youth who obviously have many challenges and are making such an effort to achieve their high school degree. So I'm interested, as well as my colleagues, in hearing about that. I wanted to talk about pre-K, and I know we've previously heard information about the successful test results and the difference in the test results with youth who are children who have been in pre-K versus those who have not. So could you talk a little bit about what the academic impact is on losing the pre-K for half-day?
I actually don't think we have good data to discriminate between half-day and full-day pre-K. We do know that our pre-K students and our Head Start students outperform students who come from private homes. However, kids coming out of private pre-K programs actually outperform our pre-K students. As Dr. Height indicated earlier, we're the only district that offers full-day kindergarten and pre-K, and I feel that we can offer a pretty robust program. What's interesting is we anticipate some families will drop out of pre-K because of the daycare situation. But the corollary to that is it will actually open up more slots for some kids who currently can't get into our pre-K. So every year, you know, we're only educating about 6,100 kids in pre-K right now, and our normal range of students at any grade is about 9,500. So you figure we're missing about 3,400 kids
Right.
in our current pre-K.
But am I correct that if they're income eligible, we say we have slots for them even though they have to go? So we're talking about a lower income population who is taking advantage of this pre-K, and we would lose those children if the daycare issue became prohibitive.
If the daycare issue became prohibitive,
Okay.
but it could potentially open up more slots for other students who are currently blocked out of pre-K.
I hear you.
It's also a savings in facility, but as Mr. Stansky pointed out, there is a transportation cost by going to a half-day program.
Okay. Could you talk a bit about the Reading Recovery Program? Again, those are children who are young and are not performing well at the reading level. So if we lose them young, which this program works to address, they'll face challenges academically for the rest of their lives.
Reading Recovery is an intervention program developed in New Zealand based on very sound principles. Our Reading Recovery teachers are the most highly trained reading teachers in the district. I'm a huge fan of Reading Recovery. However, as Mr. Stansky pointed out, not a particularly cost-effective option. Many Reading Recovery teachers only see 3 or 4 children over the course of a day. So you have your most highly trained person only seeing a few children. Over the course of a year, an effective Reading Recovery teacher might work with between 8 and 10 children for the entire year. Reading Recovery is by no means the only intervention program. We've actually invested a fair amount of money through special ed and through general funds around other reading interventions that are a little bit more cost effective. One of the things that I think you guys will see in the budget cuts, or at least in the budget deliberations, is Read 180, which is actually an intervention program for high school students. But we actually have some strong intervention programs in the elementary school early grades, and I think you're absolutely right. We absolutely have to capture them. But there
And
are
what
other
age
options.
are these children? What age, what grade?
Generally, Reading Recovery is preferred first grade. Now, what's interesting is when you, in September first grade, you do not take your lowest first graders because they're really not ready for that, for Reading
Right.
Recovery. You actually want to take a slightly higher group, and then you pick up your lower functioning kids by springtime.
Okay. And I would also like to at least discuss the furlough issue. I don't think, I hear we're going to have to take reductions, resize our system, but it seems like if we did 4 days of furlough, we would still be losing staff and be able to be able to maintain some of these very important and valuable programs. So I just want to let people know that's what I'm thinking. Sorry, Ms. Chair.
It's okay. That's how we all gather information to make informed decisions. Okay, thank you, Ms. Higgins. Mr. Armwood?
Thank you for your presentation. One thing that was not included in the presentation is contracted services. The December budget had an increase in contracted services. When will we receive a list and a justification for contracted services and to find areas we might be able to address there?
Mr. Elmwood, I think we received that as one of your questions, and so we were going to have that information for you along with the other board members who submitted questions, and we'll have all of those questions answered by Monday.
Okay. Alternative governance. How are schools that are in improvement going to receive the support that they require to move out of improvement?
Mr. Armwood, that's a difficult question. For us to answer positively, they won't receive the additional support. The support is going to have to come internally. How might that work? Every school has quality teachers who can actually drive the conversation. In addition, you're seeing, particularly this year, more evidence of cross-school collaboration, both with principals and with teachers. In Area 1, elementary teachers, actually, the area assistant soup has divided all of her schools into cohorts of about 4 or 5 schools where there's actually the principals are working with each other under the leadership of a highly effective principal. And we see that same arrangement working with teachers also. Also, you have to remember, we do have the Race to the Top application, and a significant part of a Race to the Top is around teacher networks, principal networks, around improvement. So our schools in alternative governments, our schools in school improvement are going to have to rely on the internal expertise and the cross-sharing of ideas.
We're talking about fees for athletics. One of the questions that I did submit earlier, have we looked at adding fees for other optional services we provide, such as we used to charge for AP testing, sports, band, orchestra, with potential of waivers for free and reduced lunch students. Has that been considered, and what would be our benefit from that? And I'm asking these questions because, as Ms. Jacobs said, we need to look at alternatives, and we need to be given alternatives to some of these cuts, and that's what I'm looking for.
Ms. Alma, we also, we received that as one of your questions as well, so we wanted to get a cost associated with those fees, okay, the potential, and get back to you with a response on that.
So you're telling me not to ask the questions I asked already?
Oh, no, I mean, we just weren't able to gather all of that information this quickly.
Okay. Media specialist reduction. You're going, if I remember the proposal, you are going to make them a different title. Is that correct?
No, they will remain media specialists.
Okay.
And we would be essentially cutting the numbers in half so that small schools may be served by one. So it may be more than one school that's served by a media specialist.
So larger middle schools and high schools will retain a full-time media specialist?
Yeah, we haven't gotten that specific yet, Mr. Elmwood. So we're looking at the formula. I know we were looking at it with respect to the small schools, and we'd have to determine what that would mean for our larger schools. And the other part of this conversation is how many actually are certified media specialists right now. So we have to look at the pool, look at the area of certification, and then determine how best to deploy those individuals to our small versus large schools.
Okay. One other question, which was again something I submitted earlier, but we need to put it out on the table. ESOL for the English learners and charter schools. We're paying 28.5 and 22.2 million respectively for each of those. What impacts will these cuts have, and can we cut those programs to perhaps spread some equity across the system?
Mr. Armwood, charter, budget can't be a factor whether we approve or disapprove a charter school. So if a charter school opens, there's a per pupil formula, which is in the budget document, that we give the charter schools as funding. And I think Dr. Arbogast can talk about ESOL a little bit, but one of the things with that population is as our enrollment is declining, the ESOL enrollment is going up by 1,000 students every year. So it makes it more difficult to cut that program when we're actually seeing an increase in that population.
And Mr. Armwood, and part of the consideration for ESOL is that we also receive $36 million specifically for ESOL. So we have to look at how do we match that to the students as opposed to having a lower amount that goes to all of the ESOL students.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armwood. Can I ask a quick question just based on what he said, though? With the alternative governance cuts, can you answer now whether we would have to go back to MSDE to get an additional approval based on the changes? Because they have to approve those plans, is that correct?
Ms. Jacobs, yeah, they approve those plans. We would have to submit amendments,
Right.
just as we have to do occasionally with grants. But it doesn't remove their criteria around schools that are in improvement. So those become essentially unfunded mandates that we have to still meet with respect to their standards. But we can ask for amendments, especially if some are staffed more heavily than others. The other part, and Dr. Arbogast alluded to this, Race to the Top funds also deals a significant amount of revenue for turnaround schools. And those are historically our schools in improvement. And we want to look at how we could also address some of the alternative governance models inside of the turnaround strategy.
Okay, thank you. And I think along those lines too, Dr. Height, how would the cuts in means, like I guess I should say special ed altogether, how will those cuts affect our corrective action status with regard to special ed and maintenance of effort around special ed? So I kind of jumped into somebody else. Well, it's nobody, your time was done right. That's how I get my questions and I have to go in between. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Means comes from a couple of different funding sources. One is through special ed for the special ed staffing, right. But there's also a general fund component. Means is really a process to get more inclusive education, but part of that was the funding of general educators. It's the general educators that will be cut, so the special ed part are not going to be cut. We're actually going to deploy those to still maximize least restrictive environment. So we actually feel pretty good about where we are with our staffing for special education. Our corrective action, interestingly, is not around our staffing or delivery of service. It's actually around compliance issues like timeline violations or disproportionality of suspensions. So that's not generally a staffing issue. That's really just a following the rule issue. We're actually looking at data this morning, making progress. We actually came out of one corrective action a month ago. We're making progress on others, but I don't want to tell you that I'm predicting that we'll be out of corrective action by the end of the year.
And Ms. Jacobs, just to follow up on Dr. Arbogast, so the general fund portion of means is not counted in maintenance of effort.
Okay.
And so again, maintenance of effort is per pupil funding based on the previous year, and so we have met the minimum requirement for special ed for
okay.
FY12.
Ms. Beck?
Slide 9. You have 2 items that are negotiated or dependent on negotiations that total $12 million. Like, worst case scenario, if these can't be renegotiated.
Ms. Beck, we met with our labor partners yesterday in an attempt to be very transparent about the kinds of cuts that we're looking at. We're hopeful that, given the dire situation that we're in, they understand the seriousness of that, and they have agreed to, enter into those discussions and have these really difficult decisions. But you're right, that's not something that we can sit here tonight and know is going to be a success. We are open book with all of our unions, so that means that all MOUs that are currently in place will expire on June 30th. We do not have an extension with PGCEA, so we've got to get to the table to tackle these issues and others, but you're right, we won't know for some time whether those are realized savings that we can depend on, but we're looking forward to collaborating with them.
And the timeline on that would be prior to us finalizing our budget?
It will probably run simultaneous. You'll start meeting with Jim Wadham next week. We'll talk both about negotiations and about the reduction in force provisions so that we're entering into that with eyes wide open. And then he has been working on dates with each union now to get those on the calendar so that we can be having these discussions alongside your deliberations on the budget.
Okay. I have a clarification on the middle school athletics. It's not in the package, but you've said that it's on the table.
Yeah, that was an oversight, Ms. Hathaway Beck. It was in the December presentation.
Right.
It's not in this presentation as one of the cuts in the December presentation, but we didn't take it out, so it was not removed. So that was an oversight. We will amend this to make sure that's included.
So for those families who have students in middle school athletics, they should know that that is a recommended reduction.
Yes, that recommendation has not changed.
Realizing this is your priority list, and how drastic it is, kind of wondering, you had a foundation, and what did you not put on here? It seems like you touched everything, but if we were $100 million short, where would the next series of cuts started? Because when I saw that you went into class size additions, I'm thinking if we just cannot do one of these, then we do need to go into a subsequent list of other options. So that's really what I'm asking for, is we need to have a few other options that are at our disposal in case we just do not feel we can do some of these.
Thank you. And I think that's a good recommendation, Ms. Hathaway Beck. And I just want to add that all options now come with the elimination of positions.
Right.
Because we have no more programs that will provide us with the amount of revenue that these reductions represent. So so any additional recommendations, I'd say that if in the event we had to go back and cut additional revenue, it would translate to additional positions. And we would have to just determine where on the priority list where those reductions come from.
I know I submitted my questions, and several other board members have submitted their questions. And one of my examples was the Schmidt Center is on the cut list. So the companion question I had was, why was the Owen Science Center not on a cut list? Because both of those seem to be in the same lane here. And I'd just like to be able to compare both of those cuts. Maybe this board would feel the Science Center is less of a priority than the Schmidt Center. But that was one of my questions, but that's just getting into the next tier of if our cuts had to be further inside. Finally, the questions that we submitted, I know, are supposed to come back before, I think, the 8th. And will we also be posting the questions from labor, or? Thank you.
So, yeah, all questions from labor will be posted on the website and board docs as well.
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Mr. Harris.
transportation, $400 million is a lot of money. And I know that you guys looked into finding a way that we could maybe partnership with Metro or something like that. I believe you guys told us that, and you said one of the problems wasn't Metro. Metro loved the idea, and I can't see why they won it, but the problem was with our Prince George's County's bus system, the bus. I'm kind of flabbergasted about it that they wouldn't want to sign on to do it also, but I think we really need to push that, especially at least for maybe high school, because maybe even high school or middle school, I really don't see that being feasible with elementary school. But I believe that if we just try, especially in the areas like Suitland and Adelphi, those areas where there's already a extensive bus system, that can cut a lot of costs. If we need to do a campaign where we, go up there, go up to county administration building and talk about this, or wherever it needs to go, but we need to, I think that's a real option that we can look at. And in junior ROTC, you're talking about sites. Are we talking about like creating centers at, like kind of like clusters where if you go, is that the option?
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris. That is the option. That we're looking at cluster-based centers that are arranged geographically around the county, so that in every cluster of certain high schools there is one center.
And I really don't know what to think of that. Yeah, I would definitely need to talk to a lot of my friends that are in ROCC to think about, how would they feel if they didn't have if they didn't have an ROTC program in their school, or if they were being bused to another school. But also Forestville. I know Forestville is a military academy. I know there are empty seats at Forestville. Are we looking to fill those seats, and would that actually cost us extra money or save money if we filled all of those seats? So that's another option. And then my final comment is about furlough days. Of course, I'm not an expert about I've only had a job for 4 years now, so I'm not going to act like I'm an expert. But when I was talking to teachers and listening to their discussions, I did not hear one teacher that said, I'd rather have somebody cut than take a pay cut to keep my coworkers around. So I know, like I said, I do understand that furloughs will not fix everything. And I do understand that a couple furlough days will hurt some, and it will hurt a lot. But I see how bad this budget is, and I see that, we might have to move towards, cutting even more. And I just believe that I think people will understand that having furlough days and having some of the buddies cut. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Okay, we're in round two. Ms. Johnson?
Again, Mr. Harris, you're really on a roll in terms of the preview of some of my questions. Dr. Height, our maximum usage of money, of budget, is clearly in our employees, whom we do value. There's no question. We want to sustain them. We want to keep them. What is the total cost of employment in our system? What is the dollar amount for all of our employees, irrespective of what they do?
I'll get you that in 1 second. So for salary and wages, is in the proposed budget, it's a little over $1 billion.
And what?
I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, that's just salary and wages. You add another $293 million for benefits.
Okay.
So we're looking at $1.3 billion.
$1.3 billion. And the total budget that you are proposing is 1.6.
6.
So 0.3 is everything else. When you look at this and you look at the cuts, how trying to have the children, the students, to get a level of win-win on this. My concern is we have to have adults to do this work at every level. I am not suggesting that they do not deserve pay raises, COLAs, all of that is clear. My concern is when you engage the staff, their work is clearly going to become harder for every give back that you do, because it means it costs an individual who may work beside them. That's where my biggest concern is. The give backs or the not looking at perhaps some options that will slow the bloodletting of money, i.e. furloughs. It is not what anybody wants. And furloughs are a temporary solution to what is going to become a long-term cancer, because we are not going to cure it in 2 years for these holes that we're drilling in the system. So I am asking, as you move forward, we've got $0.3 billion left for everything else. When working with our employees, what do they tell you? What do they suggest to you is fair, equitable, and reasonable? I'd like to hear, because what they're telling me is they don't want their colleagues jettisoned and dumped in the street. They don't want to be furloughed either. But if they have a choice, they think that this is rather because life will be so tough for them.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
So one of the things, Ms. Johnson, I want to come back to the point that was made earlier in the budget, and I think it was on page 15. And on page 15, you're right. And as we talk to employees, they actually, what I found is that we've had recommendations for a lot of things, and individuals do not want to lose their jobs. They don't want to be furloughed, and they want to see some of the reductions that have been supported inside of this proposed budget. However, I want to come back to this point that of a large percentage of this, and this is with our desire to deal with that 0.3%, were central office reductions. And although they only represent a small percentage of our operating budget, they account for 32.6% of the monies that we have to find. And that was with a view towards trying not to impact schools as significantly as we would have otherwise. And so we don't want to make any of these decisions either. These are very tough decisions. As a matter of fact, I've shared in a lot of meetings. This is my third budget proposal, and I haven't proposed a budget yet that gives an employee a step increase, a salary increase, something that has not been a layoff or a reclassification. And so every budget that I presented has had in excess of $100 million in revenue shortfalls. So this becomes extremely hard for the system. And how do we do this inside of this mechanism? And you're right, I think that we have to put everything on the table. One of the reasons furloughs were not on the table from my perspective is because I saw employees who suffered through last summer, this past year, but they never backed off of their work and their commitment to provide what they needed for their students. And this was an acknowledgement of that tremendous work of their teachers in some of the most anxious and severe budgetary times that we've had. So this is a part appreciation and also a part of understanding that if we're really and truly attempting to retain our workforce and not lose them to other places, then I don't think we can keep putting these things like furloughs or reclassifications and other items on the table when other individual employees and counties are actually incentivizing them to come work there. And so that was the challenge that we had inside of this, and that's why we made the recommendation. I think it's also important to share that this is a proposal, and we understand that these proposals will change. They changed last year, they changed the previous year, but I was trying to be as responsible and responsive to our workforce as we could possibly be.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, Dr. Height. And I guess I'll plug in real quick here too, just to, maybe what could help me, I kind of said this before, but I'm not convinced yet that furloughs are saving positions. When you're showing the areas that you've demonstrated as the positions, if it is, then again, I need that comparison chart. If we do this, then this is the outcome. Because that's what I would really like to see. Based on your presentation, I haven't been convinced that that will be the outcome. And then I just think that at some point, you know, year after year after year, morale can only go but so far. I mean, you can only do so much. And we gotta have some concessions here. But that's just, I completely understand, Ms. Johnson, what you're saying and what my other colleagues are saying. I'm just indicating that I would like to see then that comparison. Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll follow through on the incentive line. We speak highly qualified and certified teachers, and certainly we recognize our nationally board certified teachers. But my question is this the goal that all of our teachers become nationally board certified? Is this a standard that we are going to use? Because we have so many hardworking, dedicated teachers, highly qualified, certified, work nights, weekends, go above and beyond, and many of their incentives have been cut. And perhaps I'm using the correct word about incentives. They're not getting paid any overtime. I mean, they are there. They're early Saturday morning. We even have custodial staff. We have a lot of people that are in our buildings. They're not getting paid 1 penny. They're not working strictly to the contract. So is this? I want to make sure we're not doing a smoke screen for nationally board certified teachers. And certainly I applaud them just as I would applaud someone earning their doctoral degree. They have earned it. They're giving up time from their families. But we also have other persons that have changed their careers, and they have families. They're sacrificing. What are we doing? And I know we're talking about cutting money. We're talking about cutting positions. But are we using a smoke screen for dealing with nationally board certified teachers?
I don't think it's a smokescreen, Ms. Waller. I think, so part of this is, so I think not only do we need to look at the issue of national board certification, we need to look at our whole compensation structure. And we need to revisit that. And that compensation structure has been a product of our system for many years, and it has been enshrined in negotiated agreements. But I think we have to look at that, because on the previous slide, when I said the most important interaction is between teacher and student, but we have an awful lot of people who have no direct relationship with students who are more highly compensated. I also think that we have, and if principals are the point of influence, where we know if we get a quality principal into a school, that principal is likely to attract a lot of quality teachers. But we have a lot of individuals who are more highly compensated than principals who are not in schools. And so part of this is looking at a structure that has, over the years, become misaligned for whatever reason, and having the ability to be at full book with all of our labor partners to really look at that structure, to talk about, okay, who do we incentivize and for what? And how do we make this about performance as opposed to other types of things that we've historically provided incentives for? And I would also add that, that you throw furloughs on the table, then our ability to have that negotiation and that conversation is greatly diminished. And so that's another part of the consideration. But I think that it's not a smokescreen for national board certification. You're right. A lot of individuals do a lot of things in their system, but we have to attach a value to those things and determine and make sure those incentives match the value that those individuals add.
So
each and
will
every
you
day.
include that in some things that you all are looking at in your report back to us, since it amounts to money, savings to be spent, and, but you threw that out there, and I thought I would just,
Sure.
I need more information on that.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have other questions, but I'll go back to the next round.
You're very welcome, Ms. Waller. And this is the second round, so we'll do a motion for a third round. Mr. Armwood.
Thank you. In supporting services, you have listed specialty program transportation and bell schedule adjustments. Please explain what you mean by that.
Mr. Dotson can address that.
Okay, yeah. One of the things that we're looking at, Mr. Armwood, is the possibility of looking at the bell times. Approximately 4 years ago, the system had 27 bell times that we had on the schedule. And with those 27 bell times, we found that we could get better efficiency with compressing them to make them 7 bell times. By compressing them and making them 7 bell times, it ended up costing a little more because the drivers were required to do more schools in a shorter period of time, which increased the cost of the salaries. So what we're proposing now is kind of stretching the rubber band, if you may use as an example, increasing the number of bell times, which could possibly reduce the hours or reduce the time paid for drivers because they'd have more time with more bell times rather than a compressed number of having 7.
Do bell times equate to 90-minute periods in classrooms?
No, the bell times are strictly really goes with the pickup, drop-off time, and it is really associated with the instructional time of the day, of what time school takes in, what time school lets out. So it is associated with the instructional time, yes.
So you're talking about longer periods or shorter periods? Or
No,
just
we won't change the instructional time. What we will do is just provide schools with more bell times than we have now. We have 7 now. It's like a 7:55, a 8:25, a 8:45, and what we'll do is expand that to include more bell times to provide more time in that window.
Okay.
So in other words, Mr. Armwood, so the more we standardize the bell times, the more expensive it is, because then we require more drivers to go to more schools at the same time. With an extended bell time, we have more drivers that could go to multiple schools over a period of time. So the more we standardize the bell times and we move from, I heard Mr. Dotson talk about 23,
Yes.
Mr. Dotson, to 7. So that's standardizing the bell time where you need more drivers to go to more schools in a shorter period of time.
I do understand that. And specialty program transportation, what is that proposal about?
That's really reflective of the magnet transportation, ROTC, the IB transportation, excuse me, the vocational students. And that transportation is really set up to provide services to the students and parents who select to go to those programs. And what we're proposing to reduce the cost of transportation is not provide the transportation to those specialty programs and offer or let the parents know that if they select to go to a specialty program, then they would provide the transportation, and the specialty transportation would not be provided for those programs.
How do you address equity and access for single-family homes, many disadvantaged families that we have in the county?
So Mr. Armwood, we're going to come back to the board with a detailed proposal, but right now, it may be where we may charge a fee, and if you are, a farm student, we may not charge that fee, but we will come back with a detailed proposal. However, just to put it in context, a child going to their neighborhood school costs us about $450 per child for transportation. For the specialty programs, it's about $9,000 a child. So it's a I'm sorry, 2,000. But, sorry, 1,900. Too many numbers. But regardless, it's much more expensive. And so this is just again a proposal to help reduce some of those costs.
Thank you, Mr. Armwood. Ms. Beck? Do I have it right that the recommendation is that current employees will remain at 75-25? Current employees will remain at the 75-25% contribution, but retirees would be 70-30? Because retirees was a second separate bullet here.
Which slide? The original. The retirees are still going to be at 80-20.
Slide, still at 80-20?
So-
Slide 9, healthcare savings, 3.5 million. That was
Right.
a retiree.
So we're amending that to just, it's a negotiation with Care First
Okay, so
To-
retirees would remain
at
at
80-20.
80-20.
So the way it works is you work from years 1 to 8, you pay 25%. Once you get to year 8, you pay 20%, and then when you retire, it's also 20%.
Okay. There are 40 bulleted items on these slides. Can we get those in priority order so that if the cavalry does come over the hill with money, then we would know what the highest priorities are for retaining right now, so that when we go to Annapolis and continue to lobby for additional funds, or we go across the street, we will know exactly what is on the table at certain levels. And I think it would be good to have the priority with the FTEs and then the dollar amounts separate. And I think that would be a good public document so that, and in fact, we did this years ago with Dr. Metz, so that everyone would know if they were affected by this budget, where they fell if additional funds came into play.
I'm presuming you don't want to see all ones on the priority.
No.
Okay.
It's difficult, but it has been done, and it does prioritize your cuts because, I hate to sound like Pollyanna, but if money does show up, then we need to know as a board what the priorities are. Thank you.
Ms. Boston? Dr. Hyde, I so agree with you and the rest of my colleagues when we're talking about retaining good teachers. We're at the bottom of the list, within the state as far as academics, and where our surrounding community, they're moving up line. And if we continue to not reward or give incentives to our good teachers, then we're going to continue to lose them to our surrounding communities, which I think will have a direct effect on our students academically. So, as I told you before, I'm very concerned about, cutting classroom teachers and increasing classroom sizes, because I do think that will have an effect. But one of the things that I noticed in the budget that concerns me since I have been looking at it is the fact, and nobody's ever asked this question, so I don't know if I'm out of place of asking it, but, well, I'm gonna ask it anyhow. In the budget, I see, or it concerns me that in every department or office, there are contracted services and other operating expenses. And in majority of the time, these contracted services and other operating expenses line items are increased for 2012. And what I would like to see is a breakdown on, in every department where these contracted services and other operating expenses show up, is give a listing of what these contract services are, okay, and why are they continuing to increase over the, since 2010 budget, and I see a gradual increase for the 2012.
Ms. Boston, we'll give you a breakout of,
Okay.
of all of the contracted services.
Thank you, Ms. Boston. Ms. Higgins?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask a question about the middle school athletics. The middle school athletics is talking about eliminating the between-school sports, not the within-school intramurals. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the interscholastic competition part of
Right,
it.
okay,
Yes.
all right. And secondly, on the page 11, following up on Mr. Armwood's question, the issue regarding the transportation, do you know, or would you have to get that information in splitting out the Bell schedule adjustments from the specialty costs? Right now, you have them together at 8,100,000 FTEs. But you can get that.
We don't have that amount. Ms. Higgins, we can split that.
Okay.
To show you the cost.
You talked about, I think particularly in regards to custodial FTEs, that they would be mostly be able to be done by attrition. We've also talked about the number being 1,032 FTEs is what we're talking about. What's the estimate about how many of those would be attrition?
The
overall?
only other category that we have the data for right now is the secretaries. We lose about between 35 and 65 in that category over the last 3 years. And for the other reduced positions, I'll get you those attrition rates.
Okay, so then you're saying it looks like for custodial and for secretaries, it would be mostly attrition?
Well, for custodial, if we stay in the 75 range, I think we're going to be very close because their attrition rate is between 80 and 100 over the last 3 years. Secretaries is we're probably going to be cutting a little bit over that attrition rate, a little bit over the 65. So
Okay.
not as close in that category.
Okay, it'd be interesting and helpful. I'm sorry?
I'll get that.
Okay. And then I wanted to talk about the Calvary, because I think it would be very helpful to have the Calvary come. And, we're a democracy, so I'm saying to myself, as well as to anybody else who is interested, that if our state representatives here, that we as citizens and as residents are interested in having revenue increased to help fill that gap, we need to do that now to our state delegates. I understand that one of the revenue generatings that's being discussed with the General Assembly is 10 cents on every bottle of, or not on every drink, alcoholic drink. So I know I'm going to be doing that, and I just want to let everybody know that it would be, if you feel that way as well, it'd be very important to contact your state legislature. You do that by going on to the Maryland General Assembly. You'll see 2 tables. The far top right one says how to contact or find your legislator. You type in your address, and they give you your legislature. So I would encourage us all to let our legislators know what we think in terms of the cuts that are happening here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Higgins. That's very valuable information. Mr. Burrows?
Dr. Height, in addition to Ms. Boston's recommendation to get the contracts for the departments, I would actually like to see the contracts for the whole system, whether it's snow removal or something in IT or student services, whatever the case might be, and also the consultants that we use. Because if there is an event where someone in the county can provide the service for cheaper and we're paying someone that's possibly not even in the state for a service, and we can find someone in the county to do it, I believe that could be a cost savings and could definitely be beneficial. And secondly, I just want to make sure that we are keeping a clear line of communication open with the employees that could be affected, that we've already let them know that you can be, there is a possibility, so they can look elsewhere or prioritize their life, trying to figure out, exactly what they're going to do to survive. I also want to thank the members of the public who've already sent me 3 emails about the budget since my first comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Dr. Hyde, I guess I want to add a little bit to that, if you would. We can't go without saying you have to still do a comparison of, 83% of our budget is salaries and benefits. So you have to be able to do, and again, making informed decisions, you have to be able to do a comparison of what it costs the system for a contracted service, whether it's snow removal, versus a merit employee who gets salaries, benefits, or whatever. So make sure that table or whatever you give us includes that comparison. Okay, Mr. Burrows, thank you very much. Colleagues, that concludes round 2. I got you, Ms. Johnson, but it concludes round 2. So in conjunction with our board policy, I recognize Mr. Harris.
Madam Chair, I have a motion. I move to have a round 3 with 2-minute time limit.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that the board have a 3rd round with a 2-minute time limit. Ms. Levon, call the roll, please.
On the motion, Mr. Armwood? Aye. Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Mr. Burrows?
Aye.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Waller?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Beck?
Aye.
Ms. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, in order, Ms. Johnson, you're first, Mr. Harris, and Ms. Waller.
Thank you. I'd just like to begin. I have said, and I'll give you all of the questions at one time, but I would like to preface what I'm going to say and give people something to think about. Our neighbor just across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, Fairfax County, school system budget, $2.2 billion. And we're struggling to try to deal with 1.6. We need to think about how do we invest in our children. Question, and let me give you all at one time. Dr. Height, portfolio schools, of course, is not listed in the reorganization chart, of which night school was part of that. I'd like to know, at least I've looked and I'm not seeing it, if they're still there. At some point, I would like to know the costing out of portfolio, which has had alternative schools, et cetera, and what does that add for this budget and the services that we provide for those young people. Question 2, what is the cost of getting the work started for the smaller learning communities, middle college, AVP, and is it going to get it off to a start that we will have some place to go? How much is it going to be delayed under this budget? Next question, what are the expected savings that you project by tightly controlling absenteeism, position control, and accurate timekeeping? Lastly, what do you project will remain in operating funds for emergencies of things that have to be replaced, repaired, or restored? Clearly, you can't drain it down. There has to be a small amount because you never know. So those are the questions that I have. And, we'll go from there. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson, we'll get responses to that. I will also add that the smaller learning communities are supported by a grant from the U.S. Department of Education, so that work moves forward. The budget does not have the elimination of middle college. That's still slated to begin in the fall. And the AVP projects are work that's continuing to go on in the high schools as long as the HSAs and the combined scores a mechanism for getting students to graduation. I think I shared with the board that in the governor's proposed budget, he has already eliminated, after this year, the social studies HSA state assessment, and that's based on his budget reduction. So we know that's one HSA that will be eliminated after this year. And it still remains to be seen what will happen with the others as the state moves to a new curriculum. We'll provide the information on the savings from all of the unauthorized leave and tracking substitutes. We do have a projected savings associated with that. At the moment, we spend a significant amount, over $40 million, for issues attributed to absenteeism, and that's just substitute costs. And that's not just with teachers, that's across all positions. And then we do have a maintenance reserve, and I'll get that amount for you. And we also have a reserve in our fund balance, but that's down to about $600,000 for emergencies.
Thank you for that, Ms. Johnson and Dr. Height. Dr. Height, did you mean the government HSA?
Social studies, government.
Okay.
The government HSA.
Thank you. Mr. Harris?
I'm in the schools every day, and one of the things I notice is that already with what we have right now, that's not enough. And I know that we have to cut more. And I guess what I want to say is, last week I said, are we at the point where we can't effectively do our jobs? And this week I just want to say, we already know we're at that point, and we're pretty much at the breaking point. I tell everybody that I'm proud to be a Prince George's County product, but I'm scared that the next generation after me, the kids that are in kindergarten now, the kids that are in fourth grade now, they're not going to have the same enthusiastic. Yes, I came from Prince George's County. When I go and I talk to my posse, they come from D.C. charter schools. I forgot Arlington County, Montgomery County. The rigor that their schedules, and then I look at mine, and I just wonder. It just makes me think. Did Prince George's County do everything they could for me? And I look at this budget, and I know that coming up, Prince George's County cannot do everything that they possibly. Well, they could do everything that they possibly could, but it won't be enough. So I think we need to be pushing that with our legislators and say, hey, we need more money. If we have to change laws, I know we can't run in the red, but we have to change laws. That's what we need to do, because right now we cannot effectively do our jobs and achieve the goals we want to do at the point we're at right now.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Ms. Waller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will follow in my colleague, Ms. Johnson's stead. I'm going to ask a series of questions. Excuse me. I believe I saw posted on the website that you were holding a turnaround job fair. My question is, what is your goal for the job fair? I'm assuming that it's to hire persons. Are these internal or external candidates? And how would their hiring process affect the RIFs, buyouts, layouts, et cetera, if we have to use them in the budget process? My second question would be, can we furlough persons in grant positions if we consider furloughs? There's a terminology is used from the Broad employees. We know we have persons that are employed by us through the Broad Foundation. Could we have a breakdown of the Broad position employees? And I'd like to know the salary range, and I know some of these persons, Broad is paying for some of their salary. When we have a reduction in force or a layoff, how will these persons be affected? Will they be affected? It was listed that you would have a reorganization of the communications department. What role does our Department of Communications play in our schools insofar as academics is concerned? How many of our schools have a TV production department? And would you consider moving some of this area into the CTE program area? Madam Chair, I'm out of my time. Thank you, darling.
Yes, you are, Ms. Waller, but you got a lot of questions in. I can guarantee you that. Dr. Height, did you get all those questions?
Sure.
If you have another one, you can give it to me and I'll ask it for you.
Oh, sure. I'm following in my colleague, Ms. Johnson's
respond, Madam Chair?
stead.
Yes, you
And we don't have responses to all, but we do have responses to some.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask Ms. Schilling to respond to the questions around the job fair first, and then Mr. Stansky can respond to the furlough, and then I have a couple of responses as well.
Ms. Waller, one of the mistakes I think I made last year in the reduction in force was that I essentially directed that no recruitment occur. And that was to send a strong message to our current employees that we wanted to preserve current employees wherever possible. Unfortunately, that led to us still having vacancies in critical needs areas on opening day, to the tune of 53 vacancies, that I suspect we will see in the same areas, even if we go through even the scope of the reduction that we're talking about this year. We will almost surely still have vacancies on the first day of school in special ed, math, science, and some other critical areas. So this year we're doing very targeted and very limited recruitment, so that we are not signing contracts with individuals unless they can fill a vacancy we have today in one of those areas where we don't believe we'll have a reduction. And in the other cases, keeping in contact with those recruits so that at the end of the reduction in force process, if we still have vacancies in those hard to staff areas and we do not have current employees in those certification areas, that we can then enter into contracts. But I don't believe that it was a strategic move last year to do absolutely no recruiting, because I had children who didn't have a certified teacher in front of them. So again, targeted, limited, and for turnaround schools especially, that's a difficult area to recruit because of the challenges those schools face, because right now, without further compensation reform, we don't incentivize people to go to those schools in the ways that we might consider with our labor partners in the future. So there's still a great need at those schools, and again, targeted, limited recruitment for those schools. In terms of furloughs and how employees who are grant funded or otherwise funded, the funding for a position has absolutely no impact on the reduction in force provisions. In other words, we take the job classification, if it's a paraprofessional, whether the paraprofessional is funded through the general operating budget, through grant funds, or through special education, they are put in line in terms of seniority, and then we, as you know, in 2250 particularly, have bumping provisions that then impact where the most senior employees end up. But at the end of the day, it is the least senior employees who are being laid off under our 2250 agreement, regardless of funding source.
Just to follow up with that, so if you're a grant-funded position and we furlough you, there's obviously a savings associated with that furlough. And so what happens is when you're building your grant budget, you then take that savings from the furlough and you repurpose it within the grant to other items, purchase additional supplies, what have you. So That's technically what happens in a furlough for an employee who's funded from a grant.
Thank you, Mr. Stansky. Thank you, Ms. Waller and Ms. Schilling. I have Ms. Higgins.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the 80-20 health percentage for retirees and the 75-25. I'm not sure I quite understood the answer.
So let's talk about current employees. So if you work from year 1 to year 7,
Right.
employees pay 25% of the health premium.
Okay,
Once you hit year 8, you
Yeah.
then pay 20%.
okay,
And then once you become eligible to retire with health benefits, which I think is 15 years? 12 years? 12
Okay.
years. You can retire with health benefits, and the payment is 20%.
okay. And this proposal retains that criteria, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. On slide 12,